Well, hello, hello, hello. Welcome to another Tuesday edition of What the Heck's Going On in the Real Estate Market. Coming to you live from Massachusetts. I'm Jen Sylvester, and I am excited to talk to you. I missed last week. I apologize for that. It's been a lot going on in my household over the last several weeks. And I know we're talking about home sellers and giving concessions and all that, but I'm going to do a quick PSA that if you feel drowsy behind the wheel, please pull over. Please pull over and take a break. My youngest daughter, 18, got into a pretty bad car wreck on Easter Sunday. She dozed at the wheel and went across the lane, the opposite lane, bounced off a tree, rolled her car. Miraculously, she walked away. It was definitely a Christmas miracle, a Christmas Easter miracle, for sure. And I think she had some co-pilots watching out for her for sure. But the lesson being that you got to take a break. You got to take a break. If you're tired and getting a little sleepy behind the old wheel, it's not worth it. It's not worth it. It's the worst call a parent can get. Thankfully, it was 10 minutes before I put the ham in the oven, so there's that. So we're gonna call that a win. But we're digging into some changes, some more changes in the real estate market, and a new report came out by Redfin survey that shows that home sellers across the country are starting to give more concessions, and we're starting to see prices softening. And this is a trend that has been bubbling up. I've been watching it for months and months and months, and this is further evidence, potentially. I'm going to go through and give you my 2 cents on it, of course, because I think there's a couple issues I got with the article, questioning their statistics. But we're going to dig into that. There is a poll in the live stream, and make sure you check that out. Want to know what's going on in your area? Are you seeing houses stay on the market longer? Are you seeing some changes in your neighborhoods? Sometimes a house goes on the market and the sign goes up, and just because a pending sign or a sold sign rider doesn't go on top of that sign doesn't necessarily mean it's still on the market. But if you're on the old Zillows or Realtor.com or whatnot, you can see a lot of those listings still staying on the market versus pending. So I'm curious to know in what neck of the woods you're in and what you're seeing. We're gonna dig into some news flash, some breaking news stuff in a second here, and wanted to tell you that my guest is running late, as is the real estate market, the life of a real estate agent, I should say. Sometimes we get pulled away, and my guest had an unexpected visit from a plumber. It's something that he wasn't planning on, and called me this afternoon and says, I'm going to be late, Jen. So we're going to get him on as soon as he's able to join us, depending on how long the plumber is. We'll see how big the problem is. Hopefully not too big. But we'll get to it. We've got Mr. David Matney in the house. Good to see you, my friend, as always. And we've got Donna coming in from Spring Hill, Tennessee. Homes are staying on the market forever, excess of 6 months. Wow. Wow, wow, wow. Well, there might be some reasons behind that, and I'm going to dig into that, give you my 2 cents on it, because it may be market related. It may not be. It may not be. So I'm going to dig into the article in a second, but first, I got some breaking news. I came across some articles here that I want to share with you. Just a couple more PSAs, I guess you would call it. Some articles I'm like, I need to talk about this. So I came across this article was posted yesterday about a a retiree, a senior, um, that is taking advantage of by investors. So it says this Vietnam vet 84 was forced to sell her dream retirement home after new owners jacked up the monthly cost from $13.95 a month to $6,500, and how she lost out on $100,000 in a warning to seniors. This I wanted to just go through this quick article because I think there's some lessons here, some good things to talk about. So it says many seniors across the country would consider their senior living community a safe haven, but for some, these properties turn out to be money traps. Right when tight, right when their personal finances are most fragile. Martha Bray, an 84-year-old Vietnam veteran, found herself trapped in such an unfortunate situation. After 10 years of living in River Glen in St. Charles, a senior living community near Chicago, that she described as her dream home, the property was acquired by two investment companies that swiftly raised rents. She told NBC News that her monthly maintenance surged from $13.95 a month to $6,500, 365% increase. Unable to pay this extortionate rate, Bray ultimately decided to move out and received only 75% of the $314,000 entry fee she paid to move in. Based on the property's value at the time, she estimates her total loss at $100,000. She says, I just want people to know not to believe a damn word anybody says. Your money is not safe. Well, it is and it isn't. And this is the tale of warning. It says private equity invasion factors that make senior living facilities valuable, and this was interesting, to many families also make them attractive to investors. Elevated rents, reoccurring revenue, and the nation's aging population has made this a lucrative asset class for private equity firms. According to the American Seniors Housing Association's annual report of the industry, 8 of the 50 largest operators in the U.S. senior housing space were private equity firms in 2024. That's a lot. And at least three, had partnerships with real estate investment trusts or REITs. Says private equity's influence could expand further in the years ahead. A survey, gosh, I can't talk tonight, guys. A survey of seniors housing trends by global real estate investment firm JLL showed that 78% of institutional investors plan to invest their investments in senior care facilities. Opportunities exist for investors to acquire high quality real estate at below replacement cost. It says, according to the analysis, properties taken over by one private equity firm in Iowa received lower overall and health inspection ratings, had fewer nursing staff, faced more abuse citations, incurred higher federal civil monetary penalties, and experienced more payment denials for new admissions. So this is scary. So what do you do? If you're thinking about going into one of these senior living facilities, which is, it's a great way. If you have a monthly fee, it's predictable. You can plan on it. It's affordable. Going forward on a fixed income, if you're planning to do it, or if you have a loved one that is planning to go into one of these that wants to take advantage of this, what do you do? It says there are several ways you and your family can reduce the risk of financial damages from seniors living arrangements. Before you sign up, make sure you review the contract carefully and consider having the terms reviewed by an experienced lawyer. You should also try to find out which entity owns the property you or your loved one is considering. There are minimal disclosure requirements. This is what makes it hard. Minimal disclosure requirements for senior living property transactions, so it's not easy to find out if a facility is owned by a private equity firm, but the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services offers some limited information on its website about affiliated entity performance that could be helpful. So I'm going to put this article in the description, but I think the biggest thing is, if you don't see, if it is a bare bones contract, if it is a contract that is not giving you a lot of information, if, by all means, I would not sign anything is worth the cost of having an attorney. Take a look at it. A trusted attorney, not just the 1-800 call lawyer down the street, but somebody that is, has a reputation as experience in reviewing these types of contracts. Consult with an attorney and have them look at the fine print, because because of these reminds me of the mobile home, buying a mobile home, not a modular home, but an actual mobile home. Mobile homes are very similar in the sense that there isn't a registry for mobile homes that is a broad registry with public information. It's not easy to track prior ownership. It's not easy to track, what was the history behind that mobile home, in terms of liens and so forth. Yes, you can go into the UCC and find out if there are current liens on the mobile home, but you've got to do some digging, and this is the same type of scenario. If you're looking at a facility that has a reputation, you want to, well, actually, on that note, you want to look at Google reviews. You want to look at, get into the old Googles and really dig deep to find out what you can, past histories. Talk to some people that live there. Try to talk to, see how deep they dug. But most importantly, you got to do your homework. You got to absolutely do your homework as much as you possibly can, so that you know exactly what you're walking into, and try to predict as much as possible. All right. So we got, I just thought that was interesting. Super, super interesting, and a very sad story for that veteran. Michael says that Michael says, I live in Mesa. Is it Mesa or Mesa, guys? Arizona, in a 55 community, with 610 homes, maybe 3 or 4 days on market, cheap HOA. Well, that is good. That is, good for you. That's actually really good for a 55 plus community. We got Clark's in the house. Good to see you, my friend. We got Polly in the house. Good to see you, Polly. It says, hey, Jen, that's why I bought this property here in Dunkirk, Indiana. I wanted a home for myself and my 3 adult neurodivergent kids to live out their lives in safety. Well, I live in a whole house of neurodivergency, so I get it. I get it 100%. Mark, thanks for being here. Mark says, just went into escrow on a new home in Massachusetts. Woohoo! Love it, love it, love it. Oh, that's so great. Congratulations. And I'm in escrow on the house. I'm selling in California. Huge difference between the practices of these states, including the use of attorneys in Mass. Yes, yes, yes. Differences meaning pros or cons? What is your opinion on, is Massachusetts better or California better? I know California, Massachusetts, having practiced real estate in Massachusetts for almost 30 years, going on to be 29 years this year. I've always felt that there is a lot of documentation. Massachusetts likes we like the paper. Lots of disclosures and all the things. I think California's worse. I think it's substantially worse. There's a lot more to it. And we got Serenity in the house. Hello, good to see you. So I have one other little, and it's it's another article that has a I came across this. I'm gonna bring this up for news, a news update. This was put out yesterday as well, or 2 days ago, and I wanted to this type of situation, um, but almost presented itself with a client of mine recently. And so it says, we got a cash offer in a week and a half. Then came the inspection, bats, mold, and a roof leak after already sinking in $80,000, says a home seller. So this is a Reddit story that was posted, and this seller shared their experience. They said, we got a cash offer. A week and a half after listing. This house is well taken care of, but it's also 120 plus years old. We have some of those around here. Everything was on track until the inspection report came in. What seemed like a great deal suddenly felt daunting. The findings: bats in the attic, mold growth, roof leak, and an inspector described as a collapsed sewer pipe. I felt absolutely deflated. I had no idea what to do. Worse, the seller had already put in 80 grand into the property, including $10,000 in sewer work just 3 years ago. The line was scoped back then and deemed in good shape, and a tree causing root damage had already been removed. The idea that the pipe could now be collapsed was unbelievable. We're going to contact the company that did the work, and so forth. They also had bat problems. That according to the inspection report, you had bat problem. Bats are protected. One person said you can't just remove them whenever you want. It goes for a lot of things. Asbestos and lead removal and so forth. There's a lot of things that you gotta be careful about. And so they go on to, the response from the Reddit community kind of chimed in with what they should do. My thoughts on this, and the reason why I wanted to bring up this article is because when we're in a situation up here in Massachusetts, anyways, we're in a situation where multiple offers are still happening. It's not crazy like it is down in Jersey with my friend Jackie, but I'm still getting, we're getting multiple offers. And there's this common notion, if you're a home seller, there's a common notion that some might think that cash is king, and that will override some of the other contingencies. And the reality of it is that's not necessarily the case. You have to be very, very careful, especially if you have a house such as this, 120 years plus, or even a 50-year-old house or 60-year-old house, that oftentimes what I have seen by home buyers is they will do the inspection. They'll put in an offer, a cash offer that looks enticing. They have the home inspection, but then they have the intentions after the fact of backpedaling from the inspection. And depending on the inspector, I mean, who knows if the inspector's good at what they do? Who knows if half this stuff was even accurate? But the reality of it is the buyer's paying for the inspection. So the buyer is going to have that inspection report and they're going to try to use it as leverage. My advice is this: when I sit down with home sellers and I'm looking at, doesn't matter if one offer, two offers, 10 offers, you've got to look at the sum of the parts and you got to look at your situation. Are you in a house that is, in updated shape? All the mechanicals have been updated. The house is solid, structurally solid, mechanically solid. You are not concerned at all about an inspection. That is far different than a 120-year-old house. You can't feasibly do that. A 120-year-old house, 99.9 times out of 100, it's going to have some sort of a fieldstone foundation. It's not going to have a poured concrete foundation. It's going to have a lot of areas. You have older sills. You have potential post beetle damage. You have potential termites because it's been in it's you've got a structure that has been standing for over 100 years, which leaves you open to liability. That in itself is something to take into consideration, not to be lured in by a cash offer. Now, the other thing to take into consideration is, and I've seen this before, mentioned this before, is that say this offer came in and said, okay, we're going to give you a cash offer and we're going to do an inspection for informational purposes only. I'm telling you, there's no such thing. There is no such thing. If there is a home inspection contingency in your offer, that means they can back out regardless of what they say. They can back out at any time. They can renegotiate at any time. It means nothing. It means nothing. If you're in a situation where you're selling your home and you have those words come across on an offer, then I would say to your agent, hopefully your agent tells you this, great. If that's for informational purposes only, then they can do it after they close. That's end of story. If it's for informational purposes only and you have no intention of backing out, because that's what you're telling me, why do you need to do it now? You don't. You don't. You don't have to do the inspection now, and that will put their feet to the fire. Then you know exactly where their intentions lie. So I just wanted to kind of point those two out. I want to spend any more time on it. I want to get into the article here and what we're going to talk about. But it is something that I'm seeing, especially with home sellers that that have been in their home for a while. There may be some things that are in the house that you're not aware of, and we don't want to get that used against you. Mark says that Massachusetts uses the attorneys versus a title company, and so much on the real and so much on the Realtor Scotia. I'm not sure what that means, but I do. Okay, so they don't use attorney. That's right. They don't use attorneys. Title. They don't use attorneys in California as title companies. I much prefer to use attorneys for sure. Um, Much different. I think it's a better way to go. But Helene says, been hearing about people who have been having their homes stolen by title stealing. How is that possible? Yeah, so that actually, I did an article, a news article, a couple weeks ago about that, and a lot of, a lot. There was, I think it was 2 weeks ago. It was a group of real estate agents actually. It was led by a scumbag real estate agent. I don't remember. I think it was in Chicago. I don't quote me on that. And they they had a notary that fraudulently created a new deed that transferred the title into their name, and they stole the property. What you want to do on that, Helene, is you want to check with your registry of deeds in your area. A lot of registries are now offering um, title alerts for free. There are companies like Title Lock that will allow you to uh, they'll monitor your title in case someone's trying to take advantage of that, trying to mess around with your title, stealing your property from underneath you. But I noticed that in my area, in the Plymouth County Registry of Deeds, it's a free service. You sign up and you put in your name, and that's it. And then they'll alert you if something's happening on the back end. So that's a great question. Super great question. So let's get into what you guys are here for. So 44% of home sellers, are giving concessions to buyers, just shy of the highest level on record. So Redfin released this article last week, and talking about home sellers, basically trying to sweeten the pot to get buyers to the table, trying to keep buyers engaged in the process. It says home sellers gave concessions to buyers in 44.4% of U.S. home sale transactions in the first quarter. That's up from 39.3% a year earlier, and just shy of the 45.1% record high at the start of 2023. I'm going to tell you right now, it's not the whole story. And I'll tell you why in a minute. So it does show an uptick in concessions, and it is happening in a certain market segment, which will be revealed in a minute. It says, okay, so first things first. It says this is based on an analysis of data submitted by buyer agents across the country, covering rolling 3-month periods from 2019 to present. Okay, I'm going to stop right there for a second. Data submitted by Redfin buyer agents. This is not a survey done by the National Association of Realtors, where they would survey all transactions, or an outside survey company that looks at the registry of deeds on, an all transactions. This is strictly related to the transactions that are flowing through Redfin. I want to make sure that is heard, because of the fact that I think, in my opinion, that's a skewed data source. That's not telling the whole story. That means that those Redfin agents, for example, in my area, we don't have a lot of Redfin agents. We don't see a lot of Redfin agents. And I'm not seeing a ton of buyer concessions. So the data in my area is not being considered whatsoever. And if you don't consider all the data, it's not an accurate number. That is just my 2 cents, because it's all about the accuracy. You see all these headlines and whatnot, and I'm here to kind of to try to poke some holes in it to see how much truth there is. Okay, I actually had fun on this one, because I like poking holes in these articles. If it's true, it's true. But yeah, just because it's on TV doesn't mean it's real. Uh, a concession is recorded when an agent reports a seller provided something that helped reduce the buyer's total cost of purchasing the home. That could include money towards repairs, closing costs, and or mortgage rate buydowns. It does not include situations in which the seller lowered the list price of their home, or lowered the price due to a negotiation with a buyer. Sellers are increasingly handing out concessions because the housing market has tilted in favor of the buyers. Not in all markets. Home buyer demand is sluggish due to high home prices, elevated mortgage rates, and economic uncertainty. I do agree with that. At the same time, sellers are facing more competition from each other, with listings now at a 5-year high. Depends on where you're talking about. When buyers have more options to choose from, it typically means that they have more negotiating power. Plus, Redfin agents report that many homes are overpriced, which often means they linger on the market, forcing sellers to offer concessions to find a buyer. I do agree with that. I do agree with the fact that there is a stark difference between home sellers that are overpricing their homes and a market that is significantly shifting. A market that is slightly shifting, and then if a seller prices their home on a value that is 6 months old, is that a shift is that a legitimate shift in the market, or are they just not accurately predicting the data? Because the data, when you're putting together a sale price, a potential sale price on the home, what you think a buyer would pay, you've got to look at current data, current market data. And if you have a market that is in any way shifting, you can't look at that, say, okay, well, that house sold for 600,000 6 months ago, so I think I'm going to price my house at 600,000, when all the other data says that there is a small shift downward in the market values. Now you're talking about a house that has had major price reductions. The longer the house sits on the market, the more the house is going to will need a price adjustment to make up for that, to entice buyers to come to the table. And it's an artificial price reduction, in my opinion. It's an artificial price reduction in the sense that it's not a price reduction because the market's slipping. It's a price reduction because it wasn't priced properly to begin with. And I think that is a big distinction. I think that a lot of the data gets confused because of the fact that if you have sellers that are not either realistic, or sellers that are getting bad information from their agents. I talk about those 80% agents, 20% agents all the time, or for those watching that may not know, it is my opinion that 80%, maybe a little bit higher, of the agents in the real estate industry are not worth what they're getting paid. They're not professionals. They're not highly skilled. They're not putting your needs above their own. And a lot of these agents that are not skilled enough to really look and interpret the comps properly are not going to price them properly. And if you have a market that's a moving target, then you're going to get in trouble, and you're going to get in a situation where you're going to be overpriced. It goes on to say, oh, and this is the part that I kind of chuckled about. It says, this Redfin agent says, a buyer's I'm even chuckling thinking about it. Buyers used to ask for concessions to cover little things like repairs. Now they're negotiating concessions so they can afford to buy a home. A lot of sellers are offering money for mortgage rate buydowns. That is true in certain circumstances. And I recently had one seller cover 7 months of HOA fees. Okay. They continue to say that sellers are feeling nervous because a lot of them bought at the top of the market in 2021 and 2022 and will now be rebuying at a higher mortgage rate. They're worried about net proceeds. And that's why I recommend my buyers ask for concessions instead of a lower sale price. It can be a win-win, because when the buyer is catching a break and the seller doesn't have to go below the price that they had in their head. I'm going to pause there for a second, because the fact that they just said that, I'm going to switch my screen here for a second, and let's see if this will come. Oh no, hold on one second. Bear with me, guys. And actually, I don't have this queued up because I was queued up for my guest. I'm going to take this out here for a second. Bear with me for un momento, por favor. Because I want to show you the silliness of this whole, of that comment, because it may not be entirely clear on what they're talking about and how ridiculous it actually is. Let's see here. Wonder if Da, 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 da. Okay. So I'm just ignore the empty slot because that's where my guest is supposed to go. So you have your house on the market for $500,000. The buyer makes an offer and says, I'm going to offer you full price. Great. I'm going to give you $500,000, but I want you to pay $5,000 towards closing costs. Great. What this agent is saying is that it's a win-win because the seller in their mind is still getting the 500,000. No. The seller is getting 500,000 but then turning around and giving 5,000 back to the buyer. The net proceeds is $495. How is that different than a buyer offering the seller $495? Answer: none. None. This is the kind of stuff that drives me crazy, to be perfectly honest. It's a game. It's a game that they're trying to play because it's not a win-win to the seller. The seller is still walking away with $495. And if the seller in their mind wanted $500, how is it a win-win? The offer is the offer. Seller concessions are only to benefit the buyer. They do not benefit the seller whatsoever. When you receive an offer with seller concessions, super important. If you have multiple offers and you're balancing multiple offers, trying to compare one to the other, you should be looking at the net number. So if you have, an offer, you have multiple offers, and say somebody offered you 510, you're like, great, that's 10,000 over asking. Yeah, but guess what? They're asking for $10,000 as a credit. They're asking for $10,000 as a credit, but so now 510 minus 10, now you're back at 500. And you compare that to an offer that comes in at 505 with no credit. And initially, and I have had this conversation, they say, well, this one is a better offer, right? Because it's a higher offer. No, you've got to ignore this number and you got to pay attention to the net. Always pay attention to the net. Because what was happening is with these seller concessions, all that's doing is putting more money back into the buyer's pocket. They want to keep as much cash flow. They want to keep as much liquidity. And I think we're going to start seeing more of that because of the fact that maybe they're trying to reach that 10% or they're trying to reach that 20% threshold to avoid private mortgage insurance. And in order to do that, they've got to really dig deep into their pocket to come up with that down payment. But they want to be able to replenish some of that. They want to try to keep as much as they can for cash flow for their reserves. And this is how they do it. That is how they do it. The biggest concern that I have with the seller concessions, and I have been doing this for a hot second, and I've had a lot of experience in handling seller concessions from a seller's, talking to all my sellers out there. The biggest thing that I want you to be concerned, to be on the lookout for, is appraisal. Because say that you had an offer, okay, and the offer was at 520, it's on the market at 500, right? And say that the bank's going to allow them a $20,000 seller concession. Well, that's wonderful. They're going to allow a $20,000 credit for the buyer so that at the closing it shows a sale price at 520, but then there's a transfer of 20,000 from your side to the buyer's side. Fantastic. Here's the thing that you need to remember when you're looking at the credits. If they are getting a mortgage, they will be getting likely an appraisal. If they get an appraisal, the appraisal is going to be based on this number. It will have to appraise at the full purchase price, which means that if that appraisal comes in at 510, you've got an issue. Now you've got to go back to the negotiating table and say to the buyer, hey, you've got to either reduce your credit. That's a conversation that you have at the offer stage. What if it doesn't appraise for 520? Is the buyer willing to do an appraisal gap coverage? So in other words, if it comes in under any time, if it's $20,000 off or 10,000 off, will the buyer cover that appraisal gap? These are just throwing out some things that you want to keep in the back of your mind, because it's the way this article framed it with that Redfin agent is misleading. It is very, very misleading, and that's the kind of stuff that gets me a little hot under the collar. Um, let's see here. Let me get. Oh, I get some activity in the chat. Let's see. Oh, let's see. David says, "Do you think Redfin published that as a way to take a swipe at the new listing status, delayed marketing executives?" You know what, David? I don't. There is so much infighting in the real estate industry. It's gross. It's just stupid. It's stupid. It actually, you know what? Gets me aggravated, because what's the purpose of the real estate industry? It's to serve the consumer. How is all this infighting, all this nonsense serving the consumer? It's just making it more confusing. It's unnecessary. It's totally unnecessary. So I wouldn't put it past it. I wouldn't, because Redfin is publishing this article. They do have good data, but they are a real estate company. We should not be confused by that. Let's see here. Wendy says, "Thanks for exposing fake news." Yes. Well, and here's the thing: is not everything in this article may be fake, but you got to read between the lines, because not all of it, is accurate. And knowing the difference is sometimes tough, because it makes it sound like everything's on point. Yeah. Welcome. And you can catch the replay. Ina, I hope I'm saying your name right, says, "Hello from San Antonio, Texas. Average 50 to 60 days on the market around here, and new builds are severely high priced." I'm anticipating that you are going to probably see some serious shifting in that over the next 6 months. Serious shifting. And actually, I'm going to get back to the article in a second, because that is something that they did get right in terms of where the concessions are happening. It's mostly happening in new construction. Let's see. Lisa, good to see you. Yeah, day 2 on the market, buyer wanted 6% concessions. And you know what? A buyer wanting 6% concessions, as long as you look at that net, and if you're okay with the net, I mean, hey, if they want, it doesn't make a difference to you, as long as the appraisal is addressed and you get the number that you want. And keep in mind too, the credits can be negotiated as well. So if they're asking for 10,000, you can say, "Hey, listen, you know what?" And the way I negotiate from agent to agent, I talk to my seller, we go through the net. I go back to the agent and say, "Listen, here is what my seller is willing to do on the net. How would you guys like to divvy it up? Do you want to do a lower price? Do you want to do less concessions? Whatever you tell us, doesn't make a difference. What do you want to do?" But you could go back and say, "Listen, I want the price, but I only want to pay 5,000 in concessions, one half dozen or another." You're still talking about the net, but it's. I think you're probably going to see, and I'm wondering, Lisa, how much their down payment was. Are you talking about first time home buyer? Or you're talking about somebody that's trying to get 20% and wants to put a little bit more money in their pocket. Angie says, "But depending on the concession, you can write it off on your taxes and it won't add to your capital gains." That's true. That is true. It's just depending on what your tax bracket is. Talk to your CPA on that for sure. Let's see, Liz says, "Well, you're not getting the money, so it shouldn't be taxed." That's true. That is true. Wendy says, "Could also run into appraisal issues, sell over asking." Yep, absolutely. We're talking about that in a hot second ago. And yeah, Dave says, "I completely agree." Do you concur, my friend? Thank you very much. Thank you. All right. So the article goes on to say that concessions are rising mostly in Seattle and Portland. The other question that I have on this is, and primarily it's the source of the data. If the data is coming from Redfin agents only, I question all of the other data behind it. So how can they make that determination based on, do they have more agents, more Redfin agents, more data in Seattle and Portland? Potentially, potentially. But it says Seattle home sellers gave concessions to buyers in 71.3% of home sale transactions during the first quarter, the highest share among the 24 major U.S. metropolitan areas Redfin analyzed. It's roughly double the 36.4% share of a year earlier, representing the largest increase among the metros Redfin analyzed. It says the agent said that it's super common to see seller concessions for condos and new construction townhomes, but less so for single family homes, unless the single family home has been sitting on the market for a while. I don't totally agree with that in all markets. I don't. Um, I think it's probably more common for new construction, and it's going to be. So here's the thing: the reason why you're having, an increase in seller concessions, one of the main reasons is if you're in a less competitive market. Period. The reason you'd be in a less competitive market is if you're in a market that has more inventory. And typically the markets that have more inventory are going to be the markets that have more new construction. Now, new construction over the past 6-9 months have been offering seller concessions, have been offering bonuses to buyers to entice them because the inventory is growing, because people have pulled back because of interest rates, because of economic uncertainty, because of the fact that they're concerned about their jobs, because of unemployment, because of rising unemployment, because of a lot of things, cost of living, all the things. People are kind of pulling back, and I've got some stats on consumer confidence that is, I think, also affecting it. But you have these areas that have that building inventory. The sellers, primarily the builders, are looking for ways to get a leg in. Now, I did have a situation where I had a seller concession just this past week, and it was in a situation where, I mean, I'm in Massachusetts. We still have a huge deficit of inventory. It's not a competitive market. I mean, it was in a town that is severely depleted. That is higher demand. However, buyers are pulling back. The buyers are kind of, pressing pause. They're being super, super cautious. So we only had a couple offers. Now, the reason why they came to the table with the concession was not to try to renegotiate and try to, get the seller. It wasn't for the seller's benefit at all. It wasn't to try to entice a buyer. It was the buyer just trying to keep more money in their pocket because they're putting a bigger down payment putting a bigger down payment on their mortgage. That's it. That is it. So it's, very suspicious on these statements because of the fact that I think it's a little bit isolated. It says condos have been a tougher sell because of skyrocketing HOA fees and insurance. I don't think that's limited to condos. I think you're in Florida, yes, but across Seattle and other parts of the country, I think that HOA fees are applied to single family homes. The majority of single family neighborhoods have HOAs these days, and insurance is rising across the country. As I said, builders are offering concessions because it's in their best interest to keep sale prices high. They're willing to pay buyer closing costs and maybe provide a free washer and dryer if it means they don't have to drop the listing price. I can see where that would be the case. If you have a $500,000 sale price and a $10,000 concession, instead of selling it at $490, you sell it at $500. Now that becomes a $500,000 comp for the next home. And so that kind of keeps up, helps prop up the prices so they don't take it on the chin on the next property. But sellers are giving concessions to buyers. This is their Redfin Deals only, with seller credit by date closed in 2025. And, I would say that these areas are all divvied up by the amount of the concentration of inventory and the concentration of new construction. We are seeing, like Washington, Oregon, Georgia has a ton of new construction. Clark, if you're still here, I know you have been keeping us updated on the live stream about the amount of new construction in the Atlanta area, San Diego, Denver, L.A. Well, we know what's going on in L.A. after the wildfires. San Antonio, Texas, Arizona, California, Nevada. Go down the list, and way down the bottom, Boston, New York, Philly. I mean, these are all areas in the Northeast, less inventory, less new construction, high buyer demand, and the sellers are still holding the cards for the time being. So it's interesting. It's food for thought that I think that it's an interesting thing to consider, but you've got to make sure that you do your research, vet out those offers when you get them, and don't automatically assume that you're going to be leaving money on the table. But the flip side is I think being open. I had a situation recently where the seller was almost had their guard up. They had their guard up because they got an offer. It wasn't clean cut, great price, cash, no contingencies, all the things. And I think that my word of advice right now for anyone who has their house on the market, who's going to put their house on the market, is you need to stay fluid. Doesn't mean you need to give the house away, but you need to be willing to and open to considering some creative agreements. As long as you can walk away with the number that you want to walk away with. We had one of those situations yesterday where the seller was like, you know what, I'm not willing to I'm not willing to come down this amount of money, but you know what, I have a lawnmower, right on lawnmower, that was a big chunk of change, and it's only 2 years old, and I was going to sell it. I'll give it to you instead. That's what we did. And they got the price they wanted. The buyers were happy, and we worked out. We did it creatively. And because sometimes real estate, a good agent, a 20% agent, as I like to call them, 20% being that 20% of the agents really have the skill set and the experiential knowledge to be able to come up with some of these ideas, support these ideas, get the ideas, being brainstormed with your agent, to come up with creative ways to bring everybody into the table and make everybody happy. I will tell you, my approach to negotiation is not, it's not a one-sided situation. It's not a we win, you lose. Those negotiations seldom work. Nobody wants to lose. Nobody wants to feel like they gave it all and got nothing in return. The goal is to at least feel like you've met in the middle in some way, shape, or form. Plain and simple. And having that mindset to be like, okay, not give everything to the buyer, but at least, come to a common a meeting point. You give a little bit, they give a little bit, and then everybody's happy. Hopefully. I'll check the chat here. I don't know if my friend, so Joe Porreca was supposed to join me today, and I don't know if Joe's going to be able to join. We'll see. It's not looking good. His plumber must have taken a long time. Poor guy. I know he was disappointed. Let's see. And he says, one thing Redfin is good at is research. I would agree. I just don't like it when they use data from their own agents like that. But yes, I do agree. Let's see. Lisa says, I'd be sad if I bought a $500,000 house that didn't have a washer and dryer. Yeah. So you know what? Here's the thing is every area is going to be different. Some areas, the washer dryer automatically included. Some areas, the stove. Here in Massachusetts, the stove is typically included in the house. Other states, it is not. Somebody had asked me on a comment this past week if the stove has to work, and typically, it's like, that would be like asking if the house, do you absolutely need to have running water? It's presumed that it has running water. It is presuming that the septic is functional. It's presuming that the heat works. It's presuming the stove works. But that being said, as long as you disclose everything, disclose everything, put it up front, you can sell a house in any condition. Any condition. You have to look at it for the market. You have to look at it for your circumstances. You have to look at it for what the buyer, market is? Do you have buyers in your market that would buy it in that condition? You have to consider. It's like if you're in a market where, you know what, it would be it would you would have to you'd be dealing with a white elephant if you had a stove that didn't work and nobody's going to buy it because they would be like, I don't want to deal with that. Well, then, you know what? You fork over the money now instead of potentially a discount at a home inspection or something of that nature. Um, I'm a fan of remedying those things if you can up front. The reason being is that you know uh, you're not going to be out just the cost of whatever it is needs to be repaired. People want to be compensated for their inconvenience. So, in other words, a new stove is $500. I don't even know how much a new stove costs nowadays. It's more depending on all the bells and whistles, I guess. But just for giggles, let's say it's $500. Your buyers will probably be looking for $700, $800, maybe even more, because they want to be compensated for the inconvenience of having to go and arrange to get the stove, and they're going to be without a stove when they close on the house and all the things. So if you're going to deal with that anyways, then get it a new stove or get it fixed up front nullifies the situation. And a lot of repairs, I feel that way for sure. Um, if you have the power to do it, depends on the situation. If you have like 10, 12, 15 items on a checklist of items that are broken, you sell it as is. Sell it as is, price it properly, and let the new owner deal with it. Landy T. Barbara, good to see you. Thanks for being here. Has there ever been a situation where the house doesn't appraise? I have yet to buy a house where the house didn't appraise, even when the most recent house we bought didn't seem worth it. Worth what? Didn't seem worth, must be, didn't seem worth it. So, yes, I've had that plenty of times where a house didn't appraise. We saw that a lot before the market crashed in '07 and the prices went crazy high. Um, Different story than now because before the great financial crisis, there wasn't the influx of cash that we see today. So the market today in 2021, 2022, huge down payments, cash offers, all the whole nine yards. But back then, everything was financed and financed to the hilt so that the appraisals were key. But anyways, to get back to your question, what happens when a house doesn't appraise? First off, that is a question that when you're on the seller side, you want to have that conversation with your agent, and the agent should have it with the buyer agent on the what if. You want to have a contingency plan. You should have a price on your house that you can justify the price. What do I mean by that? When I put together a recommended value, I put together a valuation that I can absolutely, without a shadow of a doubt, stand behind. If the seller decides to go a little bit above that, they know that that number may not be supported by an appraisal. And if it's not, we may have to dial it back if the appraisal doesn't come in. But that number is supported. Now, if a buyer comes in and says they're going to offer 50,000, 60,000, 70,000 over asking, and I had a situation like this about a couple months ago where a buyer, to beat out 6 or 7 other offers, made an outlandish offer. And I had the wherewithal to tell the sellers, who were all excited about this offer that was over, it was 10, 12% over asking. It was a high offer. And when we were reviewing the offers, I said, I need you to understand that this is not real money. It may not appraise. If it doesn't appraise, we have to go back to the negotiating table unless we decide what we're going to do now. And ultimately what we ended up landing on is we negotiated for the buyers to cover a portion. They were willing to, not the entire gap, but a portion of that gap. So that worst case scenario, if the appraisal didn't come in for that high number, the seller could at least be guaranteed up to a certain number, because what that means is that the buyer has to fill the gap. If the appraisal is off by 20,000, the buyer has to kick in $20,000 more, for their down payment. And if you do that, now you can look at your net proceeds and say that's the number. That's the guaranteed number. So if it's 500 asking price and 550 is the offer, and the buyer says I'll cover 25,000 appraisal gap, then I would tell my sellers, do not break out the champagne. Do not get excited about the 550, because it may not appraise. If it doesn't appraise, what that means is that the bank will not lend on that purchase price. The adjusted price is now whatever the appraisal price is, and then it's percentage of that for their down payment and the loan. And the buyer would be responsible for covering the difference, which often means you go back to the negotiation table, and oftentimes the seller has to scale back and meet that number, or the deal dies and you go back to square one. So it has happened. A lot of banks, if you're putting a big enough down payment, they're going to waive the appraisal anyways, which nullifies the whole thing. But definitely something I've said. I've said something I've seen for sure. Yeah, Clark says there's a lot of new construction, a lot of incentives and buying down interest rates. Yes, yes, and yes. Yeah, Lisa says the sellers definitely need to be realistic and flexible in this market. 110%. MHOA, good to see you. So a lot of apartments came online this year in Denver. Rents are easing, but not sure about the effect on home prices. Almost all new construction has been apartments. We've actually seen a lot of apartments here in the Plymouth South Shore area. And I think it's just, a lot of it is the fact that these new construction companies are looking at, how much money can they make in the smallest footprint possible, but also filling the need. What is the need? What is the housing need for that particular area? Mm. And so, if you have a need, I mean, we have a situation where not too far away, 10-minute drive from where I live, the next town over, we had a mall. Or I had one of those, traditional mall. You go inside and all the things, like an indoor mall, and malls are dying. It's dying breed. They're going by the wayside across the country. They literally knocked down a whole section of the mall. Sears. So you guys remember Sears department store? Ripped it all out, completely demolished it. They built a ginormous apartment complex right in the parking lot of the mall. And then when they were building it, I said, you gotta be kidding me. This is ridiculous. Well, by the time they were done, they had garage buildings, which served as kind of a buffer to the other parking lot. They had the mall, the buildings were built kind of like almost like in a pseudo horseshoe kind of, that surrounded by like a courtyard, with grass and all that. And those things, they rented out crazy fast, because there's a need, and they were not cheap, not at all. But it's all about the demand. It's all about the demand. Angie says, do you usually ask your sellers to offer a home warranty for 1 year? That's a great question. So, all right, being here up in New England, New Englanders are we're a prickly bunch, spicy bunch. Everybody's very suspicious. Home warranties are not big up here at all. Home warranties, New England, up in the New England area, any companies selling home warranties have a battle because everybody, we're like, I don't think so. I'm not gonna trust these people, all the things. So, I mean, there are companies that offer home warranties. Angie, I could probably count on one hand over the last 29 years how many home warranties that I have, orchestrated into to a contract. That being said, I actually bought my brother and sister-in-law, because that's the kind of sister I am, when they bought their first townhome. What a great housewarming gift, right? Here's a home warranty. It's super exciting. However, their air conditioner, central air, died 6 months after they moved in. You're welcome. They got a whole new central air system for like $50 because that had that home warranty. Maybe it's worthwhile, but it's not a big deal. So it depends, Angie, where you're at. I think a lot of areas in this country, there's some states where they do a home warranty with every transaction. But here uh it's not a normal part, course of action. It's not something that we normally do. Um MHOH says, Colorado has condo construction defect laws that causes developers to shy away from condo construction. Interesting. Interesting, interesting. Well, a lot of states, I mean, have a Massachusetts has a standard 1 year warranty on all new construction. Period. Mandatory. Um, so that's interesting, and I wonder what that stems from. Was that something that happened in Colorado, or is that something that they were watching the industry and they see what's happening down in Florida, and they want to ensure that something like that doesn't happen in their area? Interesting. Angie says home warranty is pretty standard in California. I've heard that. 100%. I have heard that. And you know what? And if you're used to seeing it and it's part of the process and it's part of what you do, people don't home buyers, home sellers don't think twice about it. Um, but if it doesn't, like it is here in Massachusetts, everybody says, well, wait a minute, what's a home warranty? And it sounds like a scam. It isn't necessarily. But it's I don't know. Again, New Englanders are suspicious bunch. Suspicious bunch. I will tell you, just as a total side note, back before my real estate days, uh, back in my youth, I worked at a department store called Leechmere. I was in the electronics department selling TVs and such. And we were pushed to offer home warranties, not home warranties, but warranties on the products, extended warranties. Needless to say, our region did not do well because everybody's like, yeah, I don't buy them. I don't buy them in my cars. I just don't. I'll self-insure by doing my homework before I commit to the car, and then make sure that I do all my proper maintenance and stay on top of those on that maintenance, and so on and so forth. But anyways, I digress. Um, I wanted to share with you guys. This article came out a couple days ago about price cuts, and kind of on the heels of what's happening in the market. Fast Company, I think, does a lot of good data research, different from, say, Redfin, in the sense that in that particular article, anyways, that it's more far-reaching. They're surveying all of the data, and it says in total, 302,260 U.S. homes for sale on Realtor.com in March of 25 had a price cut that represents 33.9% of the active U.S. housing inventory. And I got some opinions on why that's happening. It says just because a home listing gets a price cut doesn't necessarily indicate that the home actually sold for less than its comp. Some real estate agents use pricing strategies that intentionally list too high to test the market or create negotiation room. I think that's a huge, huge mistake. Huge mistake. After all, even during the pandemic housing boom, when home prices were surging, 18.7% of U.S. homes for sale in March 2021 still saw a price cut. That said, if the share of inventory receiving a price cut rises beyond typical seasonal patterns, it can suggest a market where home buyers are gaining leverage. Conversely, if the share of inventory receiving a price cut falls beyond seasonality, it can indicate a market where home sellers are gaining leverage. It says, here's how the percentage of U.S. active U.S. active housing inventory receiving a price cut in March of 2025 compared to the historical totals. And I'm just going to skim down here. So in terms of over the course of the last 10 8 years thereabouts. Do my math right. Um, this is, since March. So they're looking March for a reason, because they're looking at March being the start of the spring market. And historically, we're looking at a shift. They're saying that there's more price cuts, 33.9% versus, back in March of 17. And a lot of folks will assume, oh, it's because the prices are dropping and the prices are plummeting because the market is shifting and the market's tanking. I don't think it's that at all. I think that maybe in certain markets, yes, but I also think that in the markets that are softening, getting back to what I was saying earlier, if you have home sellers that are not in tune with the market, if you're working with an agent that is not in tune with the market today, and they either give bad advice or the seller is a stick in the mud and says, I want that money. I'm convinced my house is better than everybody else's because everybody's house is their castle. It's the way it's the way that's predominantly what happens. Then they stick to their guns and they list it at a price that is not realistic. And then they end up having to cut the price to bring it down to where the soft landing should have been. I have done the comps. I've had in the home sellers that I've worked with recently over the last 6 weeks, and I've done quite a few market valuations, and looking at data. Predominantly, the ones that were when there was a big gap between the list price and the sale price, that gap almost always was an extended period of time on the market. And the longer the house sits on the market, the more that gap lengthens. If you decide to list the house, you want to list it at 500 and you put it on the market and you say, you know what, the house is worth 500, and you list it at 525. If you list it at 500, you'll get more bodies in the house. You get more buyer interest in the house. More buyer interest means more emotional investment, which means potentially more offers. More offers you have, the higher chance you have of boosting up that offer price, which means a higher sale price. If you have a $500,000 offer, a $500,000 list price that is at market value, which is always my strategy, or maybe that, or maybe it's just a scooch below, to generate that interest, not underpricing it, but just being super competitive to get more interest, that will automatically adjust to where it should be because of the buyer. Buyers determine what the house is worth. It'll automatically adjust. Compared to listing at 525, no interest, little interest, sits on the market. Buyers have to be invested. They have to be excited so they don't make an offer. Drop it to 515, 510, 499, 490. Oh, now we're going to get an offer. But sellers don't want to pay. A buyer's not going to pay over asking after it's been on the market for 30 days, because now the property is considered stigmatized. Because it's like, well, why didn't it sell? If everything, all these other properties are selling within a week, 2 weeks. You have to be very, very careful. That's why I feel very strongly about not going down the route of let's price it high, we can always adjust. There are psychological ramifications of doing that. There's also proof. There's proof in the data that shows that pricing it higher and then coming down, especially in the market that we're in, will backfire. It will. You're the captain of the ship. Seller's the captain of the ship. You can do whatever you want. If that's what you really want to do, as long as you understand what you're doing, then you do you. However, my job is to get the most amount of money in the least amount of time for you with the least amount of stress. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to do that. And if you do want to do it, that's okay. But I just need you to understand that this is not necessarily how you're going to achieve your goals. Not necessarily your way doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to have the same outcome. And I think that's why we see a lot of this, unfortunately. That's my 2 cents. What do you guys think about that? Let's see. MHOA says these condo construction laws were passed several Years ago, it makes it too easy for buyers to sue the construction companies for condo defects in the eyes of the developers. Interesting. Interesting. Lisa says, oh no, not extended warranties. I have used the home warranty on appliances in the past, though. You know what? I don't think they're all bad. It's just a gamble. It's just a gamble on whether you'll actually use it or not. Scott says, bottom line, it's all about pricing it properly. Amen. Just price it properly. The thing that is the hardest thing for a home seller to understand, in my opinion, is that a seller does not control the value of the house. You don't. You don't control the sale price. You don't control. You can control what you accept, but you cannot force someone to pay what you want. The buyer does not care. Buyer doesn't care that you need X amount of dollars to get into your next home. They don't care that you have a low interest rate. They don't care that this is your nest egg. That's not, they have their own cares. Buyers don't care. They're like, this is the thing. I will not overpay for this house. So the goal is to get out of your head what you want and to figure out what is realistic in terms of what is happening in your market, and try to predict and look in a crystal ball and say, well, what are buyers doing on other properties? And you say, okay, I'm going to take my best guess on what they're going to do on my property. And if that's not enough to do what you need to do, maybe it's not the right time to sell your house. If you can't do it, then you can't do it. But you can't draw blood from a stone. And unless you're in a market like Jackie Baker's market, where people are just doing crazy, stupid things with home offers, overpaying like bonkers. I mean, honestly, guys, why? What's the draw with Jersey? I don't know. Seriously? What do I know? Angie says, do you think it's better to list lower to get more interest and offers, or listing a little higher to have room for negotiation? I think that goes along with, that whole mindset of, uh, attracting the right people. You got to do it strategically enough so that if you're going a little higher, you got to look at what your competition is. You got to look at how many homes you're competing with. You've got to look at what the demand is in your area. How many homes are selling? How fast are they selling? Is it a super, super high demand area? Well, then maybe you do. If buyers are paying substantially over, we'll take Jackie Baker's, North Jersey, Bergen County, right? That is, hotcakes, super hot. That would be a market where I would be comfortable doing something like that, because the chances are much higher that a buyer is going to go substantially higher than the asking price. But to price it to have room to come down, I implore using caution. Suggest using caution when doing that, because I think you have potential to leave money on the table on doing that. I think that not bare bones, bottom of the barrel, dropping the price is the way to go. Giving it away? No. Try to get as close to that market value as possible to be super competitive. You want to try to get people in, really emotionally invested in the house. You want people to come in and case in point, I had a couple that came in at ask price. And by the time we actually got to the point where we were entertaining offers, because we put an offer deadline in, they came up substantially, because they didn't want to. They don't know what the other offers are, but they don't want to lose the house because they were emotionally invested. I think there's value there. It's a good strategy. Clark says there's a lot of sellers who bought high in 2022 down here, and that are trying to sell now with little or no equity because prices have softened and they haven't lived in it long enough to build up equity. That is a tough situation. And that is a tough situation. We saw that, Clark, we saw that in when the market started to crash in 07, 08, where people had the little equity that they had because they put such small down payments. on the property just to get their foot in the door. When the market softened, they were very quickly, zeroed out or upside down. And that's a tough place to be. Um, let's see here. Da, 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 da. HOA must be listening to me in the car. Well, there's the turnpike. Good for you. Be careful you're driving, though. Pay attention, pay attention. I wanted to just touch on, real quick, on consumer confidence, because I think all of this plays into, it all ties in together on why buyers are doing what they're doing, why there's pullback, why there's hesitation, why they're asking for seller concessions, why we're having this conversation at all. And it comes down to uh, a sliding um, consumer confidence. So this was published. This was updated yesterday. Today. Excuse me. Um, the days go so by so fast. U.S. consumer confidence plunges again in April. So they follow two different indexes: the present situation and the expectation index. So the present situation index is what people are dealing with now, and then expectation is what they think is going to happen. So it says the conference board. Um, the conference board consumer confidence index fell by 7.9% points in April to 86.0. The present situation index, based on consumers' assessment of current business and labor market conditions, decreased 0.9 points. And the expectation index, based on consumers' short-term outlook for income, business, and labor market conditions. This is super important because those are things that people are being they're following very closely right now. Dropped 12.5 points, the lowest level since October 2011. 12.5 points to 54.4. It says lowest level since October 2011, well below the threshold of 80 that usually signals a recession ahead. Are we in a recession? We could be. I don't think so, not yet. But could we be heading there? This is one data point that says that we might be. It says consumer confidence declined for a fifth consecutive month in April, falling to levels not seen since the onset of the COVID pandemic. The decline was largely driven by consumers' expectations. The three expectation components: business conditions, employment prospects, and future income, all deteriorated sharply. People are worried about the job market. They're worried about the cost of goods rising, and they're worried about how they're going to pay for it. All deteriorated sharply, reflecting pervasive pessimism about the future. Notably, the share of consumers expecting fewer jobs in the next 6 months, 32.1%, was nearly as high in April 2009, in the middle of the Great Recession. In addition, expectations about future income prospects turned clearly negative for the first time in 5 years, suggesting that concerns about the economy have now spread to consumers worrying about their own personal situations. However, consumers' views of the present have held up, containing the overall decline in the index. Now, I'm going to stop right there, and I'm just going to say one thing about this information. I have had comments on my videos that, and as well as other YouTube content creators and the like that cover this type of content, that assume that I'm swaying the data one way or the other because of political preference, whatever. My goal is to remain neutral, be fair to both sides, as 100% of the time. This data is not swayed by a political party. This is not CNBC or CNN or Fox or whatever. This is the conference board. This is just data. So if there is any relation to what's happening politically, we can't ignore just the talk of tariffs. We can't ignore it. Whether it's going to be good in the long term remains to be seen. If it's going to hurt us financially remains to be seen. We don't know. We don't know how all these things are going to affect our pocket, and we haven't actually felt that yet. However, what this content is saying is that people are thinking about it. And that's how it affects the housing market. If people think that there might be the potential for an increased cost in goods, an increased cost of living, the potential for a harder, it may be hard to get jobs, it might be decreased job opportunities, decrease in income, their outlook is going to change. If their outlook changes, then they offer lower on their offers. They pull back and they don't make offers. This is how this all ties together. If, the one thing that this article did say, so I can find it here, is as on a 6-month moving average basis, purchasing plans for both homes and cars declined, as did vacation intentions. I'll tell you right now, I'm not taking a vacation this summer. I am building up my reserves. Am I a worrywart? Am I like, oh, I think the market's going to tank and all the thing? No, I'm just trying to do right by my family and just play it safe so that I'm prepared. And if nothing happens, then I've got some healthy reserves. But if something does happen and, the market starts to shift, I have less income coming in, or if grocery bills go up, I can weather the storm. And I think that's just reacting, smartly. You're managing your money, you're running your household business, in a way that is, protecting yourself, from future hardship potentially. It says, but here's the thing that gets me, guys. It says plans to buy big ticket items, including appliances and electronics, pulled back in April, but were mostly up on a 6-month moving basis. Consumers' overall intentions to purchase more services in the months ahead were down, but with almost all services categories affected. While dining out remained number one among spending intentions, the share of consumers planning to spend more on dining out in the months ahead registered one of the largest month-to-month declines on record in April. Well, I concur on that. I've pulled back big time on my dining out bill to save some money. But what's interesting is that this line here, plans to buy big ticket items, including appliances and electronics, pulled back, April, but we're mostly up on a 6-month moving average basis. Not for nothing, we're in our, that's a society shift. If this was back in the 40, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, 50 years ago, when someone wants to buy a house, if they can't afford it, they just pull back entirely. Now, well, I can't afford to buy a house, but I can afford to buy the latest iPhone, or I can afford I can't even afford a housing payment, but I can afford a car payment. So for now, I'm just gonna do the car payment because that's what makes me happy. That's what makes me feel good. That's the society that we live in. I don't want to judge, but that is the shift in mindset that we need to think about. We need to change in order to, can you buy a house? Yes, it is harder. It is harder. Is it impossible? No, it is not impossible. It's just how you get there. It may take longer. May be more painful. It may be an all-out siege for you to find the house and get the down payment, all the things. But if you want it, it's like I tell my kids, if you want something bad enough, you will figure out a way. You just watch Rudy, one of my favorite movies of all time. Favorite movies of all time. Rudy, the football movie, with Brian, what's his name there? Brian Austin Green, I think that's his name. No. Anyways, you guys know what I'm talking about. From the kid who went to try to get, played football, Notre Dame, and all the things. Deck stacked against him. He didn't stop. The kid didn't stop. That's what you need to do. That's what needs to happen. But anyways, um, you guys have been great. I want to. Susan says if a realtor wants to show my home, not on market, is it worth my time? He says broker has an interested couple. Okay, I am so glad you're asking this, Susan. Oh, I'm so glad you're asking this. Mm. So here are my thoughts that I want you to consider. I want you to consider what's good for you. What do I mean by that? So if you legitimately do not want to go through how people coming through your house, if these are the most important thing on your list is I don't want people coming through my house. I'm willing to potentially take a lower sale price in exchange for having to deal with multiple offers, you know, a lot of showings, all that inconvenience. That's something to take into consideration because the trade off is by not exposing your home to the open market, you do not know what the true market value is on your house. You don't. You have one set of buyers coming through the house, one set of buyers. What that one set of buyers, that buyer does not represent the entire market. If you think the house is worth 500 and they're like, I'll give you 500, great. But how do you know that if you put it on the market, you wouldn't get 525? Because six other buyers would be interested in it and you'd have six offers and that would push up the sale price. Now, if getting the most amount of money in exchange for the inconvenience of putting it on the market, because you're still going to have to pay a real estate commission because they're with an agent, you're still going to have to pay a commission. And that's the thing with these real estate agents. A lot of them are going to charge you full commission, even though they don't do none of the marketing, they do none of the work that you would normally pay for and get in return. You're still going to pay the commission, but you're not getting it exposed to the market. And even if you're saving a little bit on the commission, say you're saving $5,000. Well, if putting it on the open market puts 20,000 in your pocket extra, is it worth it? That's a question that you need to answer. That's not any no one can answer that for you because it all depends on what is important to you. But I'm a big fan of putting it on the open market because it has the best chance to know what the true market value is of the house. I hope that helps. Um, Not to mention, an agent coming to your door, you need to have an agent representing you. Another thought is if that agent is the agent that you were going to hire to represent you, and now they're also going to be representing a buyer, that's a no-no. And if they don't represent you, you need representation and not go head to head. And yes, I'm biased. I'm a real estate agent and all the things. I've had almost 1,000 transactions over the course of my career. And if I was bringing a buyer into your house, I have 1,000 transactions of experiential knowledge, and I'm going to negotiate with you. And you've had maybe you bought and sold 5 houses over the course of your lifetime. Am I going to be able to out negotiate you and not feel bad about it because I'm representing the buyer? Yes, because I have the knowledge. I know how to maneuver. I know how to put an offer together, draft an offer that's going to benefit my buyer. Don't put yourself in that situation. I would be nervous for you to do that. Food for thought. Um, Tell it like it is. 61. Market in New England, Massachusetts is so aggressive right now. Sellers are only taking cash offers that are 100 to 200 over asking. After being in a few multi-offer situations and lost out, we hit the pause button. Yeah, I guess it depends on where you're looking because outside of the downtown, the Boston burbs, north of Boston, southern New Hampshire, getting into Connecticut, maybe, but that's not the case down where I'm at. All South Shore area, um, the central Massachusetts, not necessarily, but depends on where you're looking. Depends on where you're looking. My suggestion is for you to look at your long-term picture, hit the pause button for sure. If that's what feels good for you right now, if you're overwhelmed and you're frustrated, 100%, don't expect the prices to come down because the prices are not coming down in Massachusetts and New England. Why? Because there's too much demand, plain and simple. And they're not building enough houses to build up demand in Massachusetts. We do not have the new construction to offset the amount of buyers that want to buy. And will we see softening? But our softening is going to be instead of 5 or 6 or 7% appreciation, it's going to be 3 and 4% appreciation. It's still going to be appreciation. Prices are still going to go up. So, either you take a pause and you jump back in and you go head to head with these folks, or you maybe search in different areas. But hey, I'm rooting for you, and I hope you can find some traction, um, and get what you want. MHOA says I was very underwater in 2009. I just didn't care. Still in the house. Here's the thing about that, and I saw that a lot with folks that were in your exact situation. If you're underwater, but you're living in the house, and you have no pressure point, no intentions to sell, why does it matter? Your mortgage payment, unless it's substantially higher than what you would pay for a new house or for uh, a rental payment, then it's only real money if you sell. My suggestion is if you're not looking to sell, don't look at the value of your house. It doesn't matter. Doesn't matter, if it's unless it's a financial hardship. So the financial hardship, different story. Angie says a house is always a good investment, and if you can stay as long as stay in it as long as you can, as it takes you'll make more money. Yes, 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 yes. There's a lot of talk about the long term. There's some investors out there, some gurus that say that rentals are the way to go. Don't commit to a house, and American dream's dead. I cry BS. And yes, I'm a real estate agent, but you know what? I just this is the way I fully believe that the reality is during the 06, 07, I've been in my house since 2000. And my husband at the time and I got into some financial trouble, made some financial mistakes, and there were some tough times during that crash, but we figured it out. We were able to hold on to the house, and as a result of that pain, we chip away, chip away, chip away, chip away. Now I'm looking back, and yes, I'm still paying a mortgage payment. My mortgage payment is pennies compared to if I were gonna, say continue renting. I'd never be able to rent anywhere close to what I'm getting now for a mortgage payment. And I know that eventually I'll be able to cash out on that equity, you know, or and move on, or cash out, go in a rental home, or cash out and you know will all the money to my kids. Leave something for them. I'll be in the ground. um, let's see. MHA says I pretty much bought my house for the wrong reasons. I need a place to live. Oh gosh, you know what? I think that you might do you hate your house? Do you if hopefully you find enjoyment and the fact that it's may not be ideal, it may not be exactly what you wanted. I love a master bath. I don't have a master bath in my house. It's sometimes I very much wish I had one, but you know what? There are attributes and there are reasons why. And you made my mother always used to say, did you make the best decision at the time you had to make the decision, given what you had to make the decision? If the answer is yes, I mean, you can't, hindsight 2020 is, you can't say, well, if I had done this differently, you didn't, because you didn't have those tools available when you made the decision. And maybe the best decision was just to get a house at that time. And don't beat yourself up over it. Susan says, tell us about Zillow refusing to list a home that's been listed before. Susan, my opinion on that whole debacle, all that nonsense with Zillow, God honest truth, I think we need to just let it ride. I think that it's being overblown. I think that a lot of real estate agents are covering it and over dramatizing it. I think that there are certain companies that have some ridiculous lawsuits. There's a lot of infighting in the real estate in the industry right now. It's embarrassing for the industry. It's ridiculous. It is not consumer focused. Um, Here's the thing. My advice to a homeowner, would-be home seller, is this. When you are sitting down with your listing agent, you want to ask the listing agent, what are your options for listing the property and what do you advise? And then you make the decision. If they try to sway you and say, you know what, you should do it an exclusive where you're listing it in house for a short period of time or all this crazy stuff, honestly, I think that there's a small market segment for that, but most of it is nonsense. It's nonsense, and they're trying to get double dip and all the things. I think that there is a call for that, and I think a certain part of the real estate community is just trying to protect the reality of the choice for the seller. The seller needs to make the choice. The seller should not be bound to what MLS tells you or Zillow tells you. If the seller, if you're a homeowner, you don't want people coming through your house, you don't want to put your pictures on Zillow, then don't. You should have that option. But having it on Zillow and if you list it and you put it on the market, goes in MLS at the time that you put it on the market, and then it goes on to Zillow, exposing it to as many people as possible. I think it's being over complicated. It's being overcomplicated. And for some reason this industry loves to do that. It's not that complicated. You put your house on the market. When you are ready to have people come through, you put it in MLS. MLS automatically puts it out to all the different websites and call it a day. Why we gotta play games? That's my 2 cents, Susan. I think the whole thing is just ridiculous. Um, Landy says, how long would you give a buyer to remove their financing contingency? I want to say defer to what is customary in your area. In my area, it's 30 days. In other areas, it's longer. In other areas, it's shorter. You want to check with your agent to find out what is customary, because it's going to depend on when the appraisal's ordered, how long does underwriting take, how long they can get the clear to close, all of those things. Massachusetts, when you sign an offer, then we have to wait for the attorneys to generate the purchase and sale agreement, which is typically after they do a home inspection, which is about 10 days into the process. And only then, when a buyer and seller sign a purchase and sale agreement, only then can the appraisal get ordered. So the appraisal doesn't get ordered right out of the gate typically. So that extends the process. And underwriting will not, issue a final commitment unless they have that appraisal. So it depends. I would definitely check with what's customary in your area. So Angie says, maybe this instant gratification society will learn something from this economy. Oh, one can only hope. If only the younger generations would truly, and I'm a Gen Xer. My generation did not do well with managing money at all. But if only some of our younger generations, would look back at history, respect history. I think that is, I don't know what's going on in this country, but we gotta look back at history, respect the history, and learn from it. Yes, things have changed. Yes, things have changed. Things have gotten easier and all the things, but can we just learn from those lessons? Because the lessons don't they don't disappear. They change form. Great. You don't put your money under a mattress anymore. You put it into a high yield savings account or a CD or other investment, but you don't put it under your mattress. That was what they did then. This is what you do now. But the core principle being, you still need to save. You still need to save. You need to figure out how to save and not, structure your budget. This is hard to do. Structure your budget within your means. That is so hard right now. So hard. But people, I always say to myself, if they can do it, so can I, but how'd they do it? If they did it on, X amount of dollars, well, what did they cut? How did they live? And you say, well, I want to do that, but I don't want to give up my house. Then you're making a decision. That's just my feeling anyways. And I'm no better. I made my mistakes in that area. But yeah, I tend to agree with you. Oh, there it is. Sean Astin. Thank you. God, I love that movie. I also watched Field of Dreams the other night with Kevin Costner. I love sport inspirational movies. Just get me. I literally cried through half that movie. WC says, I got 0 offers on my property in Maryland until I offered a $17,000 concession. I wonder if that's because you were probably overpriced. Maybe. If you were $17,000, if you priced the house $17,000 less, what would have happened? Inquiring minds want to know. Um, MHOA, I really love my house. It's the neighborhood. You know what? Focus on that. If the neighborhood's not the greatest, well, that's why they make fences. For the time being. Angie says, say my mortgage is less than one bedroom apartments around here. Yeah, that's same. Same. Um, let's see. Um, oh, there are people whose job is to make it complicated. Amen. Amen. You know, whenever I sit down with a buyer or a seller and we're in negotiations, I say to them, "You want to buy the house?" Yes. Great. The seller wants to sell the house. Agreed. What do we got to do to get there? Plain and simple. It doesn't have to be that hard. It doesn't have to be a game. It doesn't have to be all the things. It doesn't have to be mean. It doesn't have to be like mudslinging and all this deceptive crap. You gotta meet in the middle. And if you can't, then it wasn't meant to be. Either the seller's unrealistic or the buyer's unrealistic, and it just wasn't meant to be. Oh well, move on. But it doesn't have to be overly complicated. It really doesn't. You do create, yeah, get some creativity, but yeah, all these rules and regulations and all the things in this, I don't know, getting off on a tangent. The powers that be probably will get some people from NAR in my comments probably. Okay, I don't call the NAR police. I don't care. I just don't care. I'll speak my truths and not apologize for it. Teresa says, recently found your channel and learning lots. Thanks for sharing. I thank you for being here. I thank you for being here. My goal here is just to speak my truth. And honestly, because of my frustration with this industry, I just want to help you guys. I just want to help. I want to share all the years I've been in this, and I've seen a lot of stuff. I've seen a lot of stuff. I just want to share that experience with you guys and cut through the BS so that you guys can hopefully learn from, those experiences and protect yourself. Because that is what I want for you. Leanne Justice says, as a seller with a home in need of loads of repairs, do you recommend these cash buyer companies, and how do you vet scammy ones? Obviously, no concessions in this case. Yeah, great question. Great question. So this goes back to the comment that came in earlier about, should I do this? Should I do a warranty? Should I do whatever? And it's going to come down, Leanne, it's going to come down to what is the most important to you? What is the most important thing to you? If you want to, because there is no right or wrong answer. If the most important thing to you is just to get out, you're willing to sell it for less. Dealing with these companies, you will sell for less. Plain and simple. Because these guys come in, they are looking, the reason why they're offering these quick, fast cash prices is they're looking to get a deal. They're going to give you the deal in exchange for you getting out from underneath the house quickly. That's the give and take. That's the give and take. You're getting your money right out of the gate. No contingencies, no buyers, no showings, no, take it as it is. In exchange, they're getting a break on the price. If you're willing to do that, then yes. And how do you vet the scammy ones? You got to go Better Business Bureau. You got to look at reviews. You got to talk to some people that have used these companies. I would look into those companies, see if you can see some reviews with people that have used those companies in the past. Try to connect with them, reach out to them. Go on Facebook, reach out to your Facebook community, social media community, see if anybody's used those types. Really dig deep to do your due diligence to vet them out, and then read every single word. Get an attorney involved. You absolutely positively have to get an attorney involved to review all the documentation. But if you don't want to leave a chunk of money on the table, then a house that needs a lot of repairs, there are a lot of buyers out there that will buy the property off market. They'll buy it the way it is, as is, sometimes full of stuff. If you can get your stuff out and clean it out, obviously anything you do will help. Depends on the situation, I guguess, and how many repairs it needs, but price it appropriately to the market, which will be higher than the cash company. There's no question. But you've got to get yourself aligned, interview agents, go through that process. Yeah, it's not necessarily fun to do, to go through that interviewing process and vetting them out and asking tons of questions, and it's time and all that stuff. But if it means putting more money in your pocket because you'll get a higher offer, that's up to you. So I'm not going to sit here and say don't do it, because it really depends on what your priorities are. It's always about you and your priorities. But you can sell a home in any condition. You can sell a home. Never listen to an agent that says you have to do this to sell. That's BS. You do not have to do anything to sell. You just gotta make sure your price matches what you're selling. It has to price and condition, price and condition, price and condition, period. You've got to be able to make sure that that house, if it needs a ton of work, it's outdated, all the things, all the other houses in the neighborhood are updated, then you price it to reflect the work. Not just reflect the work, but the cost, it's the time value of money. So what that means is it needs a new kitchen, just pulling a number out of the air, say a new kitchen's 25,000. You get out of it inexpensively. 25,000 for a new kitchen, right? Well, that's the cost of the kitchen. Well, now you've got to compensate the buyer for having to deal with it. So you may end up, compensating 30,000 or more on the price, but you'll still end up you'll still be in a better position than if you were just to go one of these cash buyer companies. No question. No question. So I hope that helps. Yeah, Angie says I stopped fun shopping and paid off debt. That certainly helped save some money. Yeah, I need to learn how to stop. I need to learn how to turn off Amazon. That's what I need. I need to break that chain. Um, Paul Orange, good to see you. I says I'm working with a mortgage broker to buy a new house. Should I shop around for mortgage brokers just like I should shop around for real estate brokers? Yes. Yes, yes, yes. Here's my advice when it comes to mortgage brokers or mortgage lenders. Mortgage broker would be a broker, being that they do not lend. Mortgage brokers typically tack on fees because they're brokering the deal, versus a lender. If it's a direct lender, the money's coming from them, then you're not gonna pay as many fees. But the thing that you want to make sure that you compare is APR. Okay, APR is going to be the adjusted rate of what that mortgage is actually costing you. It's not just the closing costs, it's all the fees. So they may entice you with a lower rate, but then the closing costs are exorbitant. And now it seems like you were getting a better deal, but in the long run, you're actually paying more. And what the APR does is basically, if you have, say, round number $10,000 in closing costs, if you tack that $10,000 onto your existing loan and then financed it over the course of the life of the loan, whatever that is, 20, 30 years, what is the average interest rate that you're paying on that adjusted amount of the loan? And that's where you have to compare apples to apples. The other thing that I would look at that I think is equally as important is the relationship with the lender or the person you're working with. If, what is their experience? How long have they been in the industry? Get a referral. Get a referral. But if you're buying brand new, because the builders will try to muscle you into what are their lenders. I have been in situations where that has happened, and then I have urged my buyer to go shopping, and they actually get a better deal than what the lender was offering for the builder. Shop around. You got to shop around. 100%. And as a side note, if you're buying directly new construction from a builder, do not. Yes, a lot of people say, "Oh, I'll save the money on the buyer's agent fees." No. You potentially could save a few bucks, but let me tell you, what you're going to get in return is you're not going to get any representation. And I have seen this, saw this happen very recently, where a buyer regretted not having representation when all of a sudden things started going sideways and there were issues, and the closing date kept pushing out, pushing out. Then there was an issue with the foundation and all the things. And the builder is the builder. They don't really care about you. They don't. And you have nobody advocating for you, going to toe to push them to get what you want. Make sure you get a buyer's agent for that. Uh, David says, "No sidekick today." No, actually, my friend Joe Porreca was supposed to join me, and he had to deal with a plumbing situation on a with a transaction he's working on. So, um, thank you so much. Thank you for being here. 100%. And Angie says, "We always look for homes needing repairs and did everything ourselves. I wish there were more repos in the market." That's the way I bought my house. We bought our house. It had good bones and needed a lot of work. And my husband and I chipped away at it for years and years and years and years. We were here 16 years before we finally saved the money and then did the things that we couldn't do ourselves. So roof, siding, um, didn't want to deal with windows because I wanted to have builder construction grade windows. I didn't want to have replacement windows, and whatnot. And I needed new it needed new framing around the windows, rotted sills and things like that. So, but we did a lot of stuff ourselves. It's very satisfying, as long as you're doing it the right way, which I'm a stickler for doing it the right way, or I don't do it at all. Oh, Sam, this is a great question. What's the process of buying a short sale home? Oh boy. How much time do you have? Um, and is it possible to get them to turn power and water on to get a complete inspection? I love the house, but I want to know what I'm walking into. Yes. Oh, that's a great question. I had a ton of these. I worked on a ton of experience on this stuff back when the market crashed. So for those that may not be familiar with short sales, because we really haven't seen those since the crash, a short sales in simple terms is when you owe more than what the property's worth. Say the property is worth, 500,000, but you took a loan out and you owe 600,000 or 550,000, and you are totally upside down on the property and you need to sell. You need to sell. So what happens during a short sale is you would make an offer as a buyer, you make an offer on that property, and then the listing agent with the seller puts together a package. The seller writes a letter to the bank and tells the bank, "Hey, listen, I owe more than I were than the property value is worth, but I have to sell, and here's my tale of woe." It's a hardship letter. They have to outline what their hardships are. Not that they just want to get out, but like they have significant financial hardships that could potentially result in foreclosure. They have to sell the idea to the bank. And if they do that successfully, the bank forgives the difference. You buy the property at a reduced cost, and the seller is able to get out from underneath the property. Here is the cautionary tale with short sales. Number one, that is a lengthy, lengthy, lengthy process. I had one that lasted 18 months. And the reason why it lasted 18 months is went through 3 buyers. We would put the deal together, go to the bank doesn't answer, and it's just a siege. It's a siege, calling, 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 calling. 6 months in, buyers bailed, started with another one. Same thing, buyer bailed, started with another one. And finally, on the third buyer, it stuck. Um, it was brutal. It was brutal. Now, in a short sale, the homeowner owns the house all the way to closing. This is not a foreclosure, it's a short sale. So when you're talking about getting the water on, the power on, you're dealing with the seller. You're not dealing with the bank, you're dealing with the seller. The seller is dealing with their bank to try to forgive the difference. But the seller owns the property. They don't live there, doesn't matter. It's still the seller's property. You've got to negotiate with the seller. And you've got to, if they've moved out, walked away, if they've walked away, you're not and disappeared, you're not buying that house at short sale, because the seller has to be an active participant in the short sale process. But getting the power or water turned back on or anything to do with the property, you've got to work with the seller. Now, if the seller is in hardship, you may have to buck up and say, "I'll pay for X utility to be turned on." But then you'll be able to get in there and you negotiate time frame, you negotiate inspection. All of that is negotiated just like any other offer with the seller. And then you can have the option, if that doesn't work out, you back out. But we don't see many short sales. We do not see many now because we've had 5 years of ridiculous equity growth. So I have not heard. I mean, there's going to be exceptions to the rule for sure, but it is not common. And same thing with foreclosures. There's always going to be exceptions to the rule for the foreclosures, but it's not common. But yet because there's such a big equity gap, because if somebody's in hardship, they're just going to sell and walk away with cash. There is no negotiating a shortfall. The equity is the buffer. Yes, if they bought it in the last couple of years and then they're underwater because the market tanked. If you're in an area like Texas and Austin, or in pockets in areas in Florida, and the scales have tipped, then they potentially could be in hot water. But it's not the norm. So I hope that helps. Guys, you guys have been terrific, and I got a rumbly in my tummy telling me that I gotta get some dinner. But hey, listen, I appreciate every single one of you guys joining in. We have big clientele tonight, and I so appreciate all you guys. I appreciate you being here. Appreciate all your sharing, all the things. If you need help in the Plymouth County area, I'm here. But if you are looking for an agent, as always, if you need a referral to outside that area, any area coast to coast, you fill out this link. I have been a little bit slow with the referrals. I apologize. I've had a string of unforeseeable events with my uncle passing away and my daughter getting her car accident on Easter, all the things. So some hiccups that just like all at once. It never happens. Oh, geez. So I'm kind of catching up on that, combined with a spring market that is not super busy, but it's moving here in Plymouth anyways. But and I appreciate all those that put your referrals requests in, and have been patient. I've reached out to you and all the things. I so appreciate you guys. So appreciate you guys. And I do not just pick a name and off of Zillow and send you there, or look at an agency that sold a lot of houses and just send you there. I do interview every single agent that I refer to, which takes more time, but that's the quality that I want to commit to. And I don't want to give you a name that I can't stand behind. So that's what I got to say about that. So thanks so much. It looks like poor Joe didn't join me, and I'm sure he's feeling pretty terrible about it. And but you know what? It happens. It happens. I appreciate you guys. Hey, listen. Be good. Be safe. Look both ways before you cross the street. Check in on your neighbor. And as always, as I always say, you know what? If you can't see eye to eye with someone, you disagree with whatever their political stance, their opinions, or whatnot, before you jump to conclusions, seek to understand. Try to understand where they're coming from, and maybe that'll shed some light on things that you'll realize that they're not terrible. They're just you're just seeing things differently, and that's okay. That's okay. It's okay that we don't disagree, but seek to understand. And then maybe we can find some peace in this craziness. Everybody have a great week. I will see you all next week, next Tuesday, 6 p.m. Eastern. Same bat time, same bat channel. Have a great week, everybody. Bye.